¿Qué ole, familia? Don't be so quick to pull out the Spanish-English dictionary. You won't find that there, but that roughly translates to what's up, family. April 29th, 1992 is a date that is forever engraved in my life. This picture to you might seem like a faraway place in a faraway land. But that's my apartment building right there. Those were the 1992 LA riots. I grew up in South Central LA. And I grew up an angry kid. And I grew up an angry kid because life kept on telling me that I wasn't going to be able to do much with my life. I struggled to watch my parents pay rent every single day at the end of the month. For a 7-year-old to watch that, it made me angry. And I realized that the people who were able to pay the rent at the end of the day and the people who were able to feed their families and provide safety were the gang members. I didn't idolize gang members because they were, the best dressed or because they got out the girls or because they got out the cars. I loved my family enough to consider that as a potential career option. And so I grew up angry. And the night during the riots, when the guards came in and when the cops came in, and I was looking outside of my window, expecting Rambo or somebody to come, help us out, it turns out that they were the ones pointing the guns at me. But it wasn't always bad. And I want to stress that this is one story of one life and how actions affect. For those of you that haven't put two and two together, I'm an avid Dodger fan. And Dodger Stadium actually sits in the middle of Elysian Park, the second oldest city park in the city of LA. And I remember going up with my mom and my dad and my sisters and going up to this park and having a carne asada, our picnics out there, and listening to the ball game in the background. And it was a little escape away from all the grime and the street lights and the graffiti that was there, for a couple of hours every weekend when we could, when my parents could afford to, we would get out there and celebrate. And I went to Dorsey High School. Now, if you're familiar with LA culture and LA history, you know that Dorsey High School is the rival to Crenshaw High School. And Crenshaw and Dorsey High School are more than just rivals in your traditional sense of rivalry. They're also the birthplace of the Bloods and the Crips, two of the largest gangs ever to come about in the face of the United States. And the first day that I went into class, into 9th grade, they put us all into an auditorium, and they tell us, look to your left and look to your right. You're probably not going to graduate. Those people that you looked at, you're probably not going to graduate. So again, there I was. And then again, there I was being an angry kid. Well, forget you then. I already know what I'm going to do. I'm going to get mine. I'm going to get my money, and I'm going to take care of my family. And I already know how to do that. So I ended up in 9th grade detention. And in 9th grade detention, I was given an ultimatum. They said, either you stay in detention or you go to Eco Club. Now, for you, it might be a quick jump. I was like, hold up. Who's an Eco Club? The dorks and the geeks and all these people who I didn't associate with. But I ended up taking a chance. And I ended up going, and the first thing that they told me was, pick a bag of seeds and we're going to go to the garden. And in this garden, I decided to grow jalapenos because I wanted to grow jalapenos for my mom. And I wanted to make salsa at the end of it for her. And they tricked me. And all of a sudden, I started worrying about photosynthesis and the pH balance and what kind of soil would make my jalapenos grow better. So I stuck with it. I kept on coming back because those jalapenos represented my love for my family. And at the end of that semester, Miss Pepin gave me an opportunity of a lifetime. She said, we're going to go and take this trip. You're going to get on a plane. You're going to get on a bus. It's a pretty far away place. But trust me, you're going to like it. And I said, all right, Miss Pepin, I'll go with you. And then, so we get into Salt Lake City, fly in there, take about a 5-hour bus ride into Jackson. And it's nighttime. So I don't quite understand where I am, but I know it's nighttime. And I take a step off that bus, and the first thing that hits you is the fresh air. It pierces your lungs. Second thing that hit me, I looked up, and for the first time in my life, I saw more stars than I could count. For the first time in my life, I saw more stars than I could count at the age of 15. And I had to pinch myself to try to figure out, no, that's not the ghetto bird. If you don't know what the ghetto bird, that's a police helicopter. It's not the ghetto bird. All right, we're good. And the next morning I wake up, and these things are staring at me. And it was that 1, 2, 3 punch. I was done. I was game over. It changed my life. Because I realized something, that just as I was connecting with these mountains, these stars, all these different things out in nature, there was still a part of me that was part of my community back in South Central LA. My family's still there with me. And that somehow, some way, you can put scientific terms to it, you can put different words to it, but the words in the dictionary don't make enough justice to it to describe that connection when you get it, when everything in this world matters. And I went back to my community, and I found these guys, Martin LeBlanc at the Sierra Club and Bill Vanderberg at Crenshaw High School. And together we schemed and plotted. And we said, we're going to come up with a program to get more kids outside. And they became my mentors. And then we went on and created the first ever Environmental Justice Youth Leadership Academy in LA. And that program replicated throughout the country. And some of the standards are now in place throughout schools and throughout programs that train young leaders to take issues into their own hands in their own communities throughout the country. And we had fun during those times. We went to Santa Monica. There we are fooling around. But at the same time, we faced reality. That's the ConocoPhillips refinery in Wilmington, California. Those are the smokestacks. Wilmington, California has one of the highest asthma rates in all of the United States. Cancer rates off the roof. So we question these things. Why in our community? Why not out here in the Grand Tetons? Why us? And then we put the tools in their hands to create the change that's needed for their community. Because I don't have the answer for somebody in New York as somebody in LA. And then around in 2005, Richard Louv wrote a book, Last Child in the Woods. And he coined a phrase, nature deficit disorder. In this, he said, this generation will be the first generation to deal with a misconnection with nature. Many of you can remember in this room that were born before 1980. Remember a time when you could go to a wall and pick up a phone and make a call. Now I can tweet right now in my pocket. Some of you remember the time when TV went off and there was static. And right before that, the national anthem came on, right? I don't remember that time. I don't know about that time. Average teenager in the U.S. now spends over 40 hours a week plugged into a TV or some kind of electronic media communication system. We're not saying that all these things are bad. We're saying that there needs to be a balance somewhere in between. And so we got together in Nebraska in 2009, and 15 individuals from all across the country got together and created something called the Natural Leaders Network, an initiative by the Children of Nature Network. And Richard Louv co-founded that organization. And pretty much what I said to Rich when he asked me the question, well, what do we need to get more young people involved into this? And I say, Rich, you need to create a platform where young people can come in and take this in their own image and mold it in our own movement. And so we do this in a couple of ways. One of them, communication. We develop a Natural Leaders Toolkit that sends it off. It's free for download and all that good stuff. But we realize that more than just creating communication toolkits and messages, we need to communicate with each other. We know that the generation that came before us has a lot of information to give. We know the information that comes before us also has a lot of information to give. We started looking at diversity in nature, that the word nature doesn't necessarily mean 500 miles away with a backpack on in the middle of the woods. Nature can be found right at your front yard, a bus ride down to the beach, or in the middle of Kenneth State Park in South Central LA. And we started asking other young people across the country to send us their picture, how they got outdoors. This is what we started getting. 100,000 participants in 543 events in 43 states. And it all started with that group of 15 people. So this new nature movement, it calls for breaking down the silos of environmentalism and conservationism and civil rights movement and feminism. It calls for a movement that brings us all together. Because at the end of the day, if we're not connected with each other, we're not connected with our own world, and we're not connected with ourselves. And there's a movement out there brewing, and I know you can feel it too. And I'm not saying that I have all the answers. And I'm not saying that I have all the reasons. But here's 7 reasons that you can dwindle on and munch on. So take it from these kids. Let's go get outside. But an idea worth sharing is this legacy camp. This legacy camp will bring together the traditional community leadership training that needs to happen in every community. Every community needs a leader. Right now, I'm not sure that you can pinpoint to every community in the United States and make sure that there's a leader in there that's under the age of 30, that's taking the charge and leading the way to solve solutions in those communities. And the other part is just getting people outside, getting them outing certified to take people outside. What does it take? First aid certification, how to take a trip, how to plan, leave no trace, all this good stuff. That's my idea worth sharing. In last year, in 2010, in the summer of 2010, I was in Salt Lake City, and I was looking at this beautiful picture of the Grand Tetons. And behind me comes this guy, this tall, slanky guy, and I tell the story pretty much the same way I told it to you. And he says, well, we should go climb the Grand Tetons since it means so much to you. I'm going in 3 weeks. And I look at him, I'm like, I don't have money, I don't have the gear, I haven't climbed in a long time. He's like, don't worry about it, you can do it, So we go over, and he takes me over, and he's like, come with me. And we go over to Steve Rendell, president of North Face at the time. He tells Steve, remember, I still don't know his name. I still don't know exactly who he is. He looks over to Steve and he says, Steve, Juan and I want to go climb the Grand. Can you help him out? He needs a plane ticket. And Steve just looks over to me and he says, yeah, sure, whatever. So 3 weeks later, I find myself on a plane, flying into Bozeman, getting ready to go climb the Grand. And on September 9th, 2010, I got to climb the Grand. But I didn't get to just climb the Grand. I got to climb it with one of the most amazing climbers in human history, Conrad Anker, who's the guy who found Mallory's body up on Everest. And we found a connection between us from South Central LA to Bozeman, Montana, through nature. Who would have ever thought? And so I became that kid that was looking at the bottom of that Teton Valley 11 years ago as I took a step for the first time off of that bus. And then 11 years ago, 10 years later, I was on top of that peak. I do this because of my family. Nothing else should matter. If you don't care about your family, and I consider you all here part of my family, then you shouldn't be doing this. I'll leave you one quote. Once social change begins, it cannot be reversed. You cannot educate the person who has learned to read. You cannot humiliate the person who feels pride. You cannot oppress the people who are not afraid anymore. We have seen the future, and the future is ours. Cesar Chavez. Thank you.
Juan Martinez. Good stuff.